Shabbas, daf from Kuf Chavav through Kuf Lamed Beis. On Kuf Chavav, the end of the daf, we begin Perek Mefanin. The Mishnah talks about moving stuff around, moving heavy boxes around. Moving stuff around, it's a question of tircha, Rashi says. You're not supposed to engage in major exertion on Shabbos, even for a need of Shabbos. So it's only mutter if it's mepnei ha'archim, for the benefit of guests, achnasas archim. The Gemara is going to talk about what a great mitzvah achnasas archim is. Umepnei bittul beis hamedrash, to enable the study of Torah, to facilitate the operation of a beis midrash. That's a legitimate reason to engage in tircha. Otherwise, you shouldn't do it. Again, Rashi says the concern is tircha. Poskim also mentioned the idea of uvdin b'chol. You're not supposed to engage in certain weekday type activities on Shabbos. But for these mitzvahs, for the mitzvah of achnasas archim, or to facilitate the beis midrash, that's a good reason. This is how we paskin in Shulchan Aruch, that if you have an otza or a warehouse, a storage house full of grain or wine, you're not allowed to start schlepping, engaging in major exertion, unless it's for the purpose of either achnasas archim or to establish a beis midrash, and there are certain rules and how you do it. The Ramah generalizes. The Ramah says, in general, any shvus, any isur d'Rabbanan that we allow for tzarach mitzvah, for the purpose of a mitzvah, you're also allowed to do for the benefit of archim. The Mishnah Berurah explains, in general, we don't allow doing an isur d'Rabbanan for a mitzvah. For Yisrael himself, for a Jew himself, to do an isur d'Rabbanan, even for a mitzvah, we generally don't allow. But what the Ramah means is that this type of shvus, the shvus of tircha, the shvusin like this, of tircha or uvdin b'chol, this type of shvus, we allow for achnasas archim. So the idea is that the mitzvah of achnasas archim is similar to other mitzvahs. The Gemara is going to talk about what a great mitzvah it is, but the point is, whatever we allow for a mitzvah, not usually a single shvus, or only certain shvusin, we also allow for the mitzvah of achnasas archim, for taking care of archim, that's considered a mitzvah on par with other mitzvahs. Once it is for a mitzvah, the Mishnah Berurah explains, even major tircha, even raising and lowering them through windows, carrying them up and down ladders, from roof to roof, even major tircha, once you have the dispensation of mitzvah, achnasas archim, or bittul beis midrash, you're allowed to do that, you're allowed to engage even in heavy tircha. The poskim explain, Rabbi Ribiat discusses at some length in his 39 Halachos, when we talk about tircha on Shabbos, there are two types of tircha, two levels of tircha, major tircha and minor tircha. Not so easy to define the difference. He suggests that major tircha might be defined as an activity people would classify as a major project, one that you would embark upon only with prior planning. Minor tircha is tircha that you would do for everyday functions, for a spontaneous need, without any prior planning. Some people plan more, some people plan less. Some people are very spontaneous and plan everything and don't plan anything in their life. Some people plan everything. But in general, halacha has two categories of tircha. Our mission is talking about major tircha, which is not mutter, even if the purpose is for the benefit of Shabbos. You want to set up something for a meal, just to do something for Shabbos. You can't do major tircha unless it's for these specific mitzvahs of major mitzvah like achnasas archim or bittul beis midrash. There's also a category of minor tircha. Minor tircha you shouldn't do for no reason, but we allow you to do it if it's for the sake of Shabbos. So minor tircha, for example, Rabbi Ribiat explains, you can move around some cases of fruit or boxes of cake. If they were outside, you want to bring them inside. You're afraid they'll get ruined, that you need them on Shabbos. That's tircha, but it's not major tircha, and it's for the sake of Shabbos. That's okay. If you have to get something you need for Shabbos, you can move around a few boxes and you can schlep stuff around, not to do a major reorganizing of your whole basement, but just to get what you need to get behind the boxes. Major tircha, you want to move major furniture around, that's only mutter for the mitzvah of achnasas archim or for bittul beis midrash. The Ramah adds, what is achnasas archim? If you invite your friends from down the block for Shabbos to spend time with you because you enjoy each other's company, that's not achnasas archim. Achnasas archim means guests who are out of town and need a place to sleep, or guests who are staying at someone else but you're inviting them for a meal. Actual guests who you're helping by giving them a place to eat, that is considered achnasas archim, but just inviting your friends is not achnasas archim. Not so clear in the Ramah. So what happens if someone does live locally and has a kitchen, but they're single or they're alone and they could use some company? Is that achnasas archim or not? That's less clear. Probably always a mitzvah of chesed, some level of achnasas archim, but the great level of achnasas archim that we're talking about to allow allow the engaging in major tircha, that you need either someone who doesn't actually have a place to eat or sleep, is from out of town, or some other level of significant Achnasas Archim. Daf Kuf Chav Zayin, the Gemara continues discussing Achnasas Archim. The Gemara brings a statement, Achnasas Archim is equivalent of Hashkamas Beis HaMidrash, of getting up early to study in the Beis Midrash, because the Mishnah puts them together, Pnei HaArchim, or Bittul Beis Midrash, either of those two things, it sounds like they're equal. Rav Dimi of Nehardad goes even further and says Achnasas Archim is even a greater mitzvah than Beis Midrash, because it says first in Pnei Archim, the order of the Mishnah, first in Pnei Archim, and then Bittul Beis HaMidrash. So you see that Archim is even more important than Bittul Beis HaMidrash. The Chavetz Chaim, in his Sefer Avos Chesed, says, according to that, Rav Dimi of Nehardad, according to his opinion, it would seem if a person was going out to learn, he was on his way to a share to learn Torah, to a chavrusa, and then he found guests who need attention, who need to be taken care of. So it's better you stop learning to take care of the guests because it's either equal to or greater than Bittul Beis Midrash. Mishnah Berurah says, but that's only going to be true. The Chavetz Chaim says that's only going to be true if there's nobody home to take care of them except for you. If you don't do it, if you go off to learn, they'll just be out there in the cold. But if you have family, if you have household members who can take care of the guests, then we apply the general rule that even when you have a mitzvah that would override Talmud Torah, if the mitzvah can be dealt with by someone else, you should learn Torah and the other people should take care of the mitzvah. Sometimes the Chavetz Chaim says to show respect, to show honor to the guests, you have to do it yourself. If they'll feel properly respected if you attend to them, but if just your kids take care of them, maybe they'll feel slighted. Then even if there are kids who are capable of taking care of it, you do it yourself, so they should feel respected. But in general, he says if someone else could do it, you should learn. Someone else should do it, and if no one else could do it, then you stop learning in order to take care of them. But if someone else can do it, then you don't, even though you're not actually learning yet. Normally, the rule is if you're learning, you don't stop to do a mitzvah if someone else can do the mitzvah. Here, even if you're just on your way to learn, he says the same thing applies. That if someone else can handle the mitzvah, you would keep on your way, keep going to the Beis Midrash and let someone else take care of the mitzvah. The Gemara goes on. The Gemara brings a very famous statement. Achnasas Archim is even greater than receiving the Shechina. Avram Avinu. Parshas Vayera, it says Hashem appeared to Avram, and then Avram saw the three people, three malachim, three guests, and he told Hashem, Im namatzasi chen beinecha al savar. The way the Chazal understand, there's a machlokes whether he was addressing the people or Hashem. Chazal he was addressing Hashem. He told Hashem, "Please wait for me," and he ran off to attend to the guest that he had. The question is this halacha l'maisa? They bring that Rav Zilberstein had a case like this halacha l'maisa. Somebody was davening Shemona Esrei and he saw a distinguished guest and he interrupted Shemona Esrei, maybe silently, but he interrupted Shemona Esrei to go take care of the guest. He said Avraham Avinu did that. He was talking to Hashem and he ran off the hand to take care of guests. Rav Zilberstein is said to have concluded it's not halacha l'maisa. We have a Torah, we have a halacha. The halacha is when you're davening Shemona Esrei, you can't interrupt. Avraham Avinu, before Matan Torah, he could make these judgment calls. Hashem will be okay with this. Hashem will be mochel me if I abandon him to deal with guests. We can't make those calls. We have to follow Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says that you don't interrupt the middle of Shemona Esrei. More than that, he brings from Rav Avigdor Nebenzahl that today tefillah is actually a mitzvah. Avraham was just talking to Hashem. It's a great thing, surely, but it wasn't a formal mitzvah. Today it's a mitzvah. You don't abandon one mitzvah to do another mitzvah. The mitzvah of talking to Hashem, you don't stop to do the mitzvah of Achnasas Archim. For Avraham, he was just communing with God. He interrupted that. It wasn't an actual mitzvah. He interrupted that for Achnasas Archim. The Gemara talks about being dan l'kav schus, judging people favorably. The Gemara brings several stories about people who judged others favorably, even though the evidence was arrayed against them. Things looked pretty bad. It seemed pretty clear that the people had engaged in bad behavior. They still managed to find creative and far-fetched seeming ways to judge them favorably, and it turned out that's actually what happened. One of the stories involves a worker who worked for several years. When it came time to get paid, the fellow said he doesn't have cash. He asked him for real estate, for animals, for bedding and clothing, and he said, I don't have anything, nothing's available. Finally, he just left. He went home. Later, the fellow brought him his wages. The fellow came back and he brought him all the wages, and he said, what did you think? This is in my son's book, Stories from Our Sages. They have a beautiful illustrated version of this story. So later, eventually, when he paid him his wages with food, delicacies, and food, and he finally paid him up with this very gracious treatment, he says, "What did you think when I told you I had nothing?" So each thing he had an answer for. When you said that you had no cash, I thought you invested all your cash in merchandise. When you said you had no animals, I thought that your animals were rented out. When you said that you had no property, I thought that the property was leased out. For everything, he had an explanation. He was danim l'kaf schus, and he said, "You're right. I swear, this is exactly what happened. Everything is exactly as you said. Just like you judge me l'kaf schus, Hashem should judge you l'kaf schus as well." The Chavetz Chaim, in his Sefer Chavetz Chaim, talks about the mitzvah of being dan l'kaf schus. He says, in general, there are rules when you have to, when you don't have to. A tzaddik, someone who's God-fearing, even if the things look less favorable, he says, you should judge him favorably. If he's a Beinoni, he says, then if it's a Safek HaShakol, if he's an ordinary person, if it's a Safek HaShakol, that you're not sure if what he did was right or wrong, you should judge him favorably. But if it looks more like he did wrong, you don't have to judge him favorably. Even then, you should judge him favorably. So there are various rules of when you have to judge someone favorably. But the Chavetz Chaim says, in his Be'er Mayim Chaim, he says, this is all Me'ikar Adin. However, he says, Midah Tova, a person who has good midos, a person who has a lofty spirit, even if things look very bad, even if things look clearly l'tzad chova, you should do your utmost to find some way of judging favorably. And the raya is from Our Gemara. Our Gemara has a whole string of stories where things looked really black, but the tzaddikim in the Gemara found ways to judge favorably, and it turned out they were right. So the midah tova, a person who wants to have good midos, should judge favorably even well beyond what the halakha requires, even if things look really bad for the person that you're judging. Daf Kuf Chav Ches, the Gemara discusses the muktzah status of various foods, raw meat and raw fish, bones. So raw meat, the Gemara brings different opinions. The Gemara says that meat, one of the opinions we paskin like this, is that raw meat is not muktzah because chazi la'omtzah, because the meat, at least certain types of meat, baravza, the meat of the flesh of geese, can be eaten raw. People used to eat it raw, so it's not muktzah. Fish, the Gemara says that it depends. Salted fish, not salted fish. It depends whether it's edible raw or not. The halacha we paskin, any meat is not muktzah because it is chazi la'omtzah, can be eaten raw. The Mishnah Berurah explains, some people, not everyone likes raw meat, but some people do. Some people have broad palates and they're willing to eat raw meat, so it's not muktzah. He brings machlokas. Some achronim say it's only soft types of meat, soft types of flesh, like yona, pigeons, or baravza, or geese. But meat from cows is tougher. You don't eat it raw. Other poskim say no meat is muktzah. All meat is mutter on Shabbos. There are different explanations why. Either because all meat can be eaten b'omtzah, or because halacha l'maisa we don't even require being able to eat it l'omtzah. But Mishnah Berurah says l'chatchila you should only be mekel on the softer types of meat. B'shas adchak he says you can be mekel on any kind of meat. That meat is not muktzah on Shabbos. Fish, we paskin that if it's salt fish, raw salt fish is mutter. Not salt fish, it's usher because it's not raw for eating. Mishnah Berurah says salt fish, whether it's herring or other types of fish, as long as it's salted, you can eat it raw. At least b'shas adchak, at least when it's difficult, like umsa, smoked fish, same category. He also brings machlokas, Taz, and other poskim that if animals can eat the fish, that the Taz says that even if humans can't eat it, if animals can eat it, it's not muktzah. Other poskim say something which is not dog food, you could give it to the dogs, but you just paid $10, $20 a pound for it. You're not going to give it to the dog, so it doesn't matter that a dog can eat it. It's not made for dogs. So you're not going to use it to a dog, so it's still be muktzah. So that's a machlokas, something which is not edible by humans, but it is human food. You're going to prepare it and cook it. It will be eaten by humans, but right now it's only edible by dogs. Is that muktzah or not? There is a question in contemporary poskim about raw meat. Today we don't eat meat raw. Certainly not in our culture. We don't eat raw meat. So you still have the din of the Gemara. Some poskim say today raw meat is muktzah machmas gufo, you can't move it. Other poskim say no, raw meat is not muktzah. Rav Simcha Bunim Cohen in his book on muktzah says l'chatchila, ideally one should be stringent. One should not move raw meat. You're rummaging in your freezer. You should not move raw meat if you can avoid it. In case of necessity, he says, if you need your Shabbos food and you can't get it out, it's behind the raw meat, you can rely on the lenient view and move the raw meat. Similarly, if your freezer is broken and everything's going to spoil unless you get it out and get it to a colder location, you can rely on the lenient opinions that raw meat is not muktzah. Similarly with fish, he brings the machlokes, Taz, and other poskim, whether raw fish, which is not humanly edible, is muktzah or not muktzah because dogs can eat it. Again, l'chatchila yishvi machmer, he says, but to avoid a major loss, to avoid significant loss, you can rely on the mekilim, like Mishnah Berurah said, you can rely on the mekilim, that since animals can eat it, it's not muktzah. And he gives the example again, if your freezer is broken, you can rely on the lenient view to avoid spoilage. You can move the fish to a better location. Here he does not say that you can move the fish simply because it's blocking the Shabbos food. I'm not sure if he means to be more strict here, and here it's only in a case of loss. Certainly, l'chatchila, one should avoid moving raw meat or raw fish on Shabbos. Of course, I would assume this does not apply to sushi or types of fish that we do eat raw, even in our cultures. It's widely done. It's not just an individual's idiosyncrasy. We do eat certain kinds of raw fish, so it would seem obvious that has the same din as the raw meat in the Gemara. Even better, raw meat in the Gemara was only edible b'shas chak with difficulty. Sushi is edible; it's a delicacy. So surely sushi would not be included in the prohibition of moving raw fish. Bones. The Gemara brings a brisa. You can metaltal bones. You can move bones because they are suitable for dogs. That's how we paskin in Shulchan Aruch. That if the bones are suitable for dogs and dogs are commonly around, even if you don't own a dog, if dogs are common in your vicinity, then they are not muktzah. If dogs would not be so common, you would have to own one yourself. So that's halach l'maisa. That's how Rabbi Simcha Bar Cohen brings again. If you want to move bones on Shabbos, certainly bones that still have meat attached that humans can eat, or soft bones, like chicken bones that humans can actually eat, are certainly not muktzah. But even bones that are absolutely not edible by humans, if they're edible by dogs and dogs are common in the neighborhood, then the bones do not become muktzah either. The Mishnah talks about a woman who's in labor, is delivering on Shabbos. So it says we can do whatever we have to do for her. Miyalden Isha. We call her a midwife, even if it involves travel through the Tchum, even Chil Shabbos. A Yoledes, a woman giving birth, is considered Chola Sheyesh Ba Sakana, and we can be Machal Shabbos for her. Gemara brings a brisa. One of the things we do, we can light a candle for her. If she needs oil, we can bring her oil. And ideally, we try to do it with the shinoi. We carry the oil and she rubs it on her hand. She brings it with the shinoi. If you can't do that, you bring it by carrying it in her hair. And if you can't do even that, then you do it by carrying it in a keli. The Gemara says when you put the oil in your hair, you're trying to do a shinoi. You're trying to avoid doing it with an isser. So schita, if we squeeze it out of the hair, there's an isser of schita. You're not allowed to squeeze things on Shabbos. So the Gemara brings two opinions. One opinion is ein schita b'seir. Schita applies to garments, but it does not apply to hair. The other opinion is even if yesh schita b'seir, Rav Ashi says, it doesn't mean you put the oil in the hair. It means you hang a little jar of oil from her hair. That's also a form of shinoi. Does not involve squeezing the hair. We pass in this basic Mishnah in Shulchan Aruch. A yoledes is considered a chola sheish basakana. You're machal Shabbos. Call her a midwife. Do whatever you have to do. Light the candles. However, you try to do a shinoi, that the Gemara says with the hair that you should try to do a shinoi. If you can machal Shabbos without doing it directly with a malacha daraisa, you should ideally use a shinoi. This is an interesting point. The Mishnah Berurah says when it comes to a normal chalash yesh basakana, someone who's been shot, who is badly ill, and we have to treat him, there's a machlokas whether you lechatchila try to do a shinoi. Some posts can say no shinoi. He's in danger of his life. Do whatever you have to do. Stop with shinoi. You don't do shinoi. So if that's true, according to that opinion, why, when it comes to mialedes, does everyone apparently agree you do a shinoi? So the Mishnah Berurah brings that some posts can say a yoledes, even though we sort of treat her as cholash yesh basakana, she's not really a full-blown sakana. Magen Mishnah says childbirth is natural, not 1 in 1,000 die. Rabbi Avram Sofer Abraham in his Nishmas Avram quotes maternal mortality statistics. Obviously, it depends on the time and the place, but it's a relatively low-grade sakana. So that's why we require you to do a shinoi. Of course, it is a cholash yesh basakana. That's clear from the Gemara. And if there'll be any delay and if it's dangerous, then of course you do it. So it is really cholash yesh basakana. But in some ways, we see that we treat a woman in labor as a little bit less of a full-blown sakana in some relatively minor ways, and this is one of them that we try to do a shinoi if it won't cause any delay. Of course, Mishnah Berurah says if it will cause delay, then certainly he says you have to do whatever you can to treat her and take care of her as with as much alacrity as possible. Now, Mishnah Berurah brings from the Sefer Hasidim, we're Mechal Shabbos for a Yoledes. Ideally, he says, when she reaches her 9th month, Rabbi Yehuda Chassid says she should prepare everything she needs before Shabbos to avoid having to be Mechal Shabbos. Whatever she can do in advance to eliminate the need for Chil Shabbos, she should do. So this is a major question contemporary posts can discuss. Can a woman travel away from her hospital on Shabbos? Is she required to be as close as she can to her hospital in case she goes into labor? She shouldn't have to drive to the hospital. So a number of major posts can say she does not have to. Again, ideally, if she could, it's a good idea, but that we don't require it. If it's difficult, if it would be significantly inconvenient, we don't tell her to do that. They bring that from the Chazon Ish, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rav Elyashiv, all say that you don't have to if it's difficult. Rav Hershel Schachter, his students quote, actually believes that a person really should stay within, at least if possible, should stay within the 9th month of pregnancy. Again, I'm not sure how broad the machlokes is. I'm not sure how Rav Schachter actually phrases it. If possible, she should. Other posts can say she doesn't have to if it's hard. Everyone may agree that if it's really difficult, she doesn't have to, and everyone really agrees that if it's easy, she should. The question is the gray area in the middle. It would be inconvenient. How hard you have to try. Some posts can say if it's kosher, if it's difficult, you don't have to. Rav Schachter apparently is a little more machmer. They bring from Rav Asher Weiss. He says Sefer Chasidim Kishmo Keinu. It's about Chasidus, Mamidas Chasidus, things that are ideal things to do. But ideally, yes, all else being equal, one should try to be near the hospital. But it's not worthwhile to burden the whole family with going away for Shabbos or to burden somebody with hosting you just for this Chasidus. So that's, I guess, all depends on the context. If you have parents who'd love to have you, or if you have close friends who are delighted to see you and your family is jumping with joy for the opportunity, by all means, a person should try to be near the hospital, try to even go to the hospital. Try to even leave his house and go to the hospital. But if it's going to be inconvenient, then you're not mechuyev to. Then it's only chasidus. You're not mechuyev to certainly to burden others by trying to do this midas chasidus. In general, poskim recommend, certainly when there's no difficulty, again, you should have the foresight to follow the Sefer Chasidim and try to do things that will eliminate or minimize the need for Chil Shabbos. Documents, leave them at the hospital instead of having to carry them. When you're going to drive in the car, you should turn off lights that are going to turn on in the car. Poskim warn, turn off lights that are courtesy lights, that are just convenience. Do not turn off things like your headlights or lights that are necessary for the safe operation of the car, but you should turn off lights that are not relevant to safety, and so on. And you can arrange, people talk about arranging car services, arranging taxis, putting numbers in speed dial, and so on, putting cash aside so they can take the money. Whatever you can do without undue convenience to avoid having to Mechal Shabbos, you should do based on this review Chassid. The Gemara talked about carrying it in her hair. The Gemara said it's chita. So the Gemara says, ain't chita b'seir. But even if there is, it doesn't mean that you put it in the hair. It means that you carry a jar tied to the hair. We paskin ain't chita b'seir, but we do paskin that lechatchila, that just means midaraisa is not considered schita, but that lechatchila, there is an isser, midrabanan at least, there is an isser to do schita b'seir, even if it's not a chiyav chatas. That's why the Mishnah Berurah explains, when we talk about how to carry the oil, if she needs oil, he says that it's actually better to hang the little jar from the hair than to put the oil in the hair itself, because either way it's a shino, either way you're not carrying it the normal way, but if you put it in the hair, there's two isurim, there's also going to be schita, and we try to avoid that lechatchila. This is why when it comes to questions like going to the mikvah or bathing on Shabbos, there are a number of possible isurim involved. One of them is schita. Even though we paskin ain't schita b'seir, there is an isur lechatchila. You're not allowed to be sochit seir. So someone who is going to the mikvah, man or woman, or someone who is bathing, has to be careful, really has to be aware of this, and should make sure not to squeeze hair to avoid the isur of schita b'seir. Daf Kuf Kaf Tes, the Gemara continues talking about the laws of someone who's sick on Shabbos. So it says, Kol tzarchei chola nasna de aramai b'Shabbos. When someone is sick, even if it's not mortal danger, not a chola sheyesh b'sakana, you can do whatever he needs, you can do via a non-Jew. Amr l'nachri v'osa, you can have a non-Jew do malacha, even malacha daraisa, for a chola. This is how we paskin in Shulchan Aruch. However, it has to be a serious chola. The fact that you're uncomfortable, you're not feeling well, is not enough to be called chola. Chola has, according to the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, chola has one of two criteria has to be met. You either have to be nafal mishkav, some level of bed rest you have to take to your bed, or you have to have such great tsar that it's considered cholak al gufo, that your entire body is achy or weak. Rav Simcha ben Cohen, in his book, says bed rest, even if you can get out of bed and walk around, but if basically you need to take to your bed, the flu, he says, or chest congestion, that would be nafal mishkav. And the cholak al gufo is a migraine headache, he says, or a severe earache, even if they're localized, they come from the air, but if their pain, I guess, radiates and enervates your entire body, that's considered cholak al gufo, even though it's not a sakana. That's the level. When you reach that level, you're allowed to have a non-Jew do malacha for you, even malacha deraisa on Shabbos. Malacha d'Rabbanan, if the non-Jew is going to do malacha d'Rabbanan, then it's a shvus to shvus, then the standard is lower. Even if you just have significant tsar, you have a toothache which is not totally taking over and debilitating you, but you have significant tsar, then you cannot have a non-Jew do malacha deraisa, but you can have a non-Jew do a malacha d'Rabbanan, because that's shvus to shvus, which we are lenient for b'makom tsar. A couple of applications of this rule of chola. Poskim express the rule hakol chola meitzel. Everyone is considered sick if it's too cold. So if it's really cold and you need the heat, this was common in Europe, they would have a non-Jew turn on the heat, light a fire, malacha deraisa, to make it hot, to make it warm. This is only if it's really cold. If it's just chilly, it's 65 degrees or 60 instead of 70, then poskim are not so quick to allow it. Aruch HaShulchan says it's hard to measure exactly how cold it is, the minute it's mekel, but other poskim say that it has to be very cold. If it's very cold, then we allow you to have a non-Jew do it, even if it's not so cold for adults, but if there are children or elderly people who are more sensitive, then again, you can have a non-Jew turn on the heat. Even turning off an air conditioner, if the air conditioner is making it too cold, again, it would have to be very too cold, but if it's too cold, again, you can have a non-Jew turn off the air conditioner. The poskim would discuss turning on an air conditioner. Do we say a kol cholim eitzel achom? It's really hot. Is that of a din choli also? Poskim debate this point. There are poskim who do allow having a non-Jew turn on an air conditioner, particularly if we assume that operating the air conditioner is only malacha d'Rabbanan. Again, once it's only malacha d'Rabbanan, then it becomes shvus to shvus, a double d'Rabbanan in cereal, and that we don't even require chola. That's enough for a significant tsar, which certainly being really hot can be, if you're used to more temperate temperatures, being really hot might be considered serious tsar. Other poskim did not allow, Rav Moshe Feinstein apparently did not allow having a non-Jew turn on the air conditioner. But some poskim actually considered that not just tsar, it's actually considered chola. That just like being too cold is a chola, being too hot is a chola. Some poskim actually entertain the possibility that even in malacha deraisa you could have a non-Jew do. But certainly if it's only malacha d'Rabbanan, there were poskim, and Chas Yitzchak, Halachos Yaakov, who said you can have the non-Jew turn on the air conditioner because of shvus to shvus. Another rule is that a katan, a minor, is considered particularly sensitive, so he's considered a chola. Even normal things that he needs, he doesn't have food, he's considered a chola. How old is the katan to be considered? How old can he be and still be considered a chola? Less than 3, certainly he's a chola. More than 9, he's not a chola. Between 3 and 9, poskim are less clear. Some poskim are quoted as saying that anyone less than 9 is a chola. Rav Simcha ben Cohen says that between 3 and 9, it depends on the constitution, the robustness of the katan. If he's a hale and hearty child, we don't treat him as a chola. If he's more delicate, then we can treat him as a chola, even if he's more than 3. One of the examples poskim give is if it's really dark and the child is really scared, that's also that's considered chola for these purposes. That if it's that's chola kol gufo. I guess this is one of the early rulings that even mental health is considered chola. The child is terrified of the dark, so they bring from the Ksos HaShulchan, you can actually have a non-Jew turn on a light, malacha deraisa, turn on an incandescent light, not because that's considered the katan is a chola. Again, if he's just kvetching about the dark, maybe not, but certainly if he's really scared, and that could be considered a chola, and you could have a non-Jew turn on a light for a young child. Daf Kuf Lamed, we begin the next parak Belezer de Mila. Rabbi Kiva says, when it comes to Mila itself is Docha Shabbos, but in general, a malacha that you could have done an Erev Shabbos is not Docha Shabbos, so getting the knife there and preparing is not Docha Shabbos, but malacha that you couldn't do before Shabbos, the Mila itself and the different parts of the Mila ceremony that have to be done on Shabbos, that's Docha Shabbos. But the Machshirin, things you could have done on Erev Shabbos, are not Docha Shabbos. The Gemara goes on, the Gemara says not just Malacha D'Oraisa is not Docha Shabbos, even Malacha D'Rabbanan is not Docha Shabbos. You don't have a Mila knife, a Yisrael wants to carry it, even if the form of carrying will be an Isser Drabanan, he wants to carry it through an area that's not a Rishus Rabban Daraisa, but it is Asr Midrabanan, a Yisrael cannot do even Malacha Drabanan. The Chacham were Hamidu Devreim Kishal Torah. They said that even Malacha Drabanan you cannot do on Shabbos. That's how we paskin in Shulchan Aruch. Mila itself is Docha Shabbos. Preparations for Mila are not. Even Malacha Drabanan is not Docha Shabbos. The Yisrael cannot do Malacha Drabanan to facilitate a Mila. What you can do is you can have a non-Jew do it. Certainly you can have a non-Jew do Malacha Drabanan. You can have a non-Jew carry in a place where carrying is only Asim Drabanan. Shvus to Shvus for Mila you can certainly do. However, a single Shvus, having a non-Jew do Malacha Daraisa, the Ramah Paskins you cannot do, the Shulchan Aruch Paskins you cannot do for Mila. Having a non-Jew carry through Rishus Rabban Daraisa, we would not allow even for the mitzvah of Mila. The Mishnah Berurah explains that the Shulchan Aruch, after he says you can't do it, he refers you to Siman Shin Zayin, and Siman Shin Zayin it says there are those who say that we do a shvus even for a deraisa for makom mitzvah. We can have a non-Jew do a malacha deraisa, a single shvus, amir la'akum, even though it's a malacha deraisa. We can do that for a mitzvah. Most poskim acholek, and the ikar is aser. We don't generally rely on having a non-Jew do malacha deraisa for a mitzvah, but in the case of great need, if there's no other way to do the Mila, then there is basis for relying on that view. If there's no other way to get it done except having a non-Jew do malacha deraisa, bring a knife through Rishus Harabim, you can do that. Shvus to Shvus is mutter. Even without any major need, we do allow Shvus to Shvus. But the Mishnah Berurah says if you have a child at home and you want to say, okay, have a non-Jew carry him through a place that's not a Rishus Harabim deraisa to go to shul, Shvus to Shvus, we don't do that because there's no need for that. Do the meal at home. Nothing wrong with doing a meal at home, he says. So there's no need to do that. So we can we don't allow even Shvus to Shvus. We don't allow that unless there is at least some kind of good reason for it. The Mishnah Berurah says if the knife is not in the house where the child is, and you have to either get the knife to the child or the child to the knife, you can go either way. You can do Shvus to Shvus. You can have a non-Jew carry the child if it's not a Malacha Daraisa, or have a non-Jew carry the knife if it's not a Malacha Daraisa. Either way, it's Shvus to Shvus. He recommends better carry the knife to the child, because if you carry the child there, you have to carry him back. You have to do extra malachas. It's better carry the knife to the child and then leave the knife there. You won't have to do an extra leg of carrying. The Gemara has a long discussion about the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer. We pass like Rabbi Akiva that machshirin mila, preparations to facilitate mila, are not docha Shabbos. You cannot do a malacha daraisa to facilitate mila. But Rabbi Eliezer shita, the parak is named after Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says he could do machshirin. The Gemara has a lengthy discussion about his shita. He holds machshirin or docha and certain other mitzvahs as well. But one case he agrees that you cannot do machshirin is for tzitzis. If a person is going to tie tzitzis on his garment or affix a mezuzah to his house, that there's no heter for on Shabbos, then he's chayav for violating Shabbos. Why? So the Gemara says because holu biyado la'afkiran. So you don't have to have the talus. You can just be mafkir the talus, and then there's no problem. If you keep the talus and wear the talus, you have to have tzitzis. You can be mafkir the talus. You can relinquish ownership of it, and then you won't have any further obligation. So there's no heter, even according to Rabbi Eliezer, to attach tzitzis to the talus. The obvious question on the Gemara is, why does it say you can be mafkir the talus? Why doesn't it just say you can not wear the talus? There's no obligation to have tzitzis on a talus if you're not wearing it. So Rashi over here and Tosfos and Menachos explain that it's true, we paskin that tzitzis is chavas gavra, and if you don't wear the talus, it doesn't have to have tzitzis. But there is another opinion among the Chachamim who says tzitzis chavas mana, tzitzis even when they're in your dresser have to have tzitzis, talus even when it's in your dresser has to have tzitzis, and the Gemara is working in that shita that tzitzis, that a garment of four corners must have tzitzis even if you're not wearing it, and that's why according to that opinion the only solution is to be mafkir. Otherwise, the mitzvah will still be in place. There's a celebrated machlokus between the Mordechai and the Magen Avram on the one hand, and other poskim, the Netziv, on the other hand, whether a person has a garment of four corners on Shabbos and he doesn't have tzitzis, and he can't put on tzitzis on Shabbos. Tying tzitzis is kosher, covered last week, in the malach of tying knots. Previous week, you can't tie tzitzis on Shabbos. So, are you allowed to wear the garment or not? The Mordechai and the Magen Avram say yes. They say the mitzvah is to put on tzitzis. I can't. I'm an onus. I can't put the tzitzis on. So I can take off the garment. I don't have to. There's no isser in wearing a garment without tzitzis. There's a mitzvah to put on tzitzis. If it's Shabbos and I can't do it, so I can't do it. So I'm patur. There's no need to take off the garment. The same way they explain a person has a home. He doesn't have a mezuzah. Does he have to sell his house? Does he have to leave his house so he shouldn't violate the mitzvah of mezuzah? No. It's a mitzvah to put on mezuzah. As soon as you can, you have to do it. There's no isser in living in the house. Similarly with tzitzis, there's no isser in wearing a garment without tzitzis. It's a mitzvah to put on tzitzis, but you can wear the garment, midaraisa at least, without tzitzis. Midrabanan, you should take off the garment. But midaraisa at least, you're allowed to wear the garment without the tzitzis. If you can't do it, you can't do it. And there's no isser midaraisa in wearing the garment. Midrabanan, you shouldn't do that. Midaraisa, you're allowed to keep wearing the garment. The Netziv disagrees, and the Netziv says there is an isser. It's not like mezuzah in the house. It's osur to wear a garment midaraisa. It's osur to wear a garment without tzitzis. If you can't put on the tzitzis, it's osur to wear that garment. Some of the discussion revolves around our Gemara. Our Gemara says, "Biyad l'afkira," and according to Rabbi Eliezer, you would be violating the mitzvah of tzitzis unless you mafkir the garment. Says the Magen Avraham, why? According to the Mordechai, you're not violating anything. Just leave the garment, whether it's chavas gavra, chavas mana, whether you're wearing it, you're not wearing it, doesn't matter. You're allowed to wear the garment. It's a mitzvah to put on tzitzis, and I can't. So what's the problem? Why is there any problem? Well, why do I have to be mafkir the garment? Why can't I just say, like Mordechai, I can't put on tzitzis, so I can go ahead, wear the garment, own the garment, keep it in your dresser, do whatever you want with it. Chavas gavra, chavas mana, doesn't matter. If I can't put on tzitzis, there's no isser to wear the garment. The Gemara seems to be a raya to the Netziv, that there is an isser to wear the garment. Magen Avraham has a very clever rebuttal. Magen Avraham says, according to Rabbi Eliezer, since in general he says, machshirin are docha Shabbos, then according to him he says that since tzitzis is docha Shabbos, then the mitzvah of tzitzis is in place. And since you have an eitzah being mafkirit, you can't do that, and you have to, and then you're not allowed to wear the garment at all. You have to just be mafkirit. But the way we paskin, that tzitzis is not docha Shabbos, then the mitzvah of tzitzis is completely inapplicable on Shabbos. I can't tie them on, so the mitzvah is simply moot. There's no mitzvah to tie the tzitzis on, and according to the Magen Avraham, I'm allowed midaraisa to keep wearing the garment, even though midrabani you're not allowed to, but midaraisa you're allowed to keep wearing the garment, even though you're not putting on tzitzis because you can't. The Daf Kuf Lamed Beis, the Gemara talks about Mila being dochet tzaras. A person has tzaras, a negak tzaras, on the organ of the Mila. If he performs the Mila, he's going to cut it off. Normally there's a prohibition against cutting off a negak tzaras. That's overridden by the mitzvah of Mila. Similarly, Shabbos. Normally doing a bris Mila would be chil Shabbos. Because of the mitzvah of bris Mila, that's docha Shabbos. The Brisa says Mila is docha tzaras ben bizmana ben shelo bizmana. Whether the Mila is being done on the right time, on the 8th day, as it usually is, that's docha tzaras. Even if the Mila is not being done on the right time, the person neglected to do the Mila, it's later, he's older, a person was sick and couldn't do the Mila, now it's not on the 8th day, but now he has tzaras, it's still docha Shabbos. It doesn't matter if the Mila is being done on its ideal time, on the 8th day, not being done on the ideal time, either way, Mila is docha tzaras. However, Yom Tov, Shabbos and Yom Tov, ain't a docha el bizmana bilvad. Mila bizmana, Mila on the 8th day is docha Shabbos, or Yom Tov. Mila not on the 8th day is not docha Shabbos. The child was sick, recovered, he's 3 weeks old, you're doing the Mila. If the first available day, if the first appropriate day is Shabbos, you can't do the Mila on that day, you have to wait till the next day. That's how we paskin in Shulchan Aruch, that Mila bizmana, Mila and tzaras is not very common. Mila bizmana and Shelo bizmana is very common. That Mila bizmana is always docha Shabbos. We do brises on Shabbos all the time. Mila Shelo bizmana, in the relatively fewer cases where we do Mila Shelo bizmana, it's not done on Shabbos. There is a famous debate among the Achronim. Which is more important? Which is a greater mitzvah, so to speak? Mila bizmana or Mila Shelo bizmana? A number of Achronim, 18th, 19th century, 20th century, a number of Achronim debate if there are two brises to do. One is a child who's 8 days old, his Mila is supposed to be done on that day. One is a child who's 3 weeks old, Mila should have been done a while ago, it wasn't done, he was sick. Both Milas are now here, both babies are now ready to have their Mila. Which one should you do first? So on a very simple level, one might assume Mila Bizmana is a greater mitzvah. Mila Bizmana is docha Shabbos. Mila Shelo Bizmana is not docha Shabbos. You see that Mila Bizmana is somehow a greater, more imperative mitzvah. So maybe that one should be the more important one. That one should go first. Says Dvar Avram, the Kovner Rav, he says no. He says that we can argue that Mila Bismana, if the choice is doing it or not doing it, it's Docha Shabbos. It's more important to do it on the 8th day than not do it on the 8th day than to do a Shalom Bismana on that day or the next day. But within the 8th day, it doesn't really matter whether it's in the morning or the afternoon, he says. So the fact that Mila Bismana is Docha Shabbos, that's because doing it on the 8th day as opposed to the 9th day is critical, and that's why it's Docha Shabbos. But if the question is just when on the 8th day to do it, then it's not a big deal. However, Mila Shalom Bismana, he says, once you miss this man, he says, then every moment is an unacceptable delay. He's very critical, he says, of those when they have a Mila Shalom Bismana who schedule it at their convenience to have so guests can come. That's wrong, he says. Mila Shalom Bismana, it must be done immediately, as soon as you can. Therefore, he argues, counterintuitively, that Mila Shalom Bismana is more of an imperative. He discusses why you shouldn't have to do it first thing in the morning even. Mila Shalom Bismana, every second that passes by, every moment that passes by is a problematic delay. That's not the case for Mila Bismana. Mila Bismana, any time of the 8th day is fine. Zriz Makdimin, you should do them, even a Mila Bismana should be done early, but that's just an ideal of Zrizus. The Mila Shalom Bismana, you've already passed the deadline, so doing it as early as you can is critical, he says. Therefore, the Dvar Avram, some other Achronim, incline to the view that Mila Shalom Bismana should take precedence over a Mila Bismana. Other poskim disagree, other poskim invoke other principles. Chaviva mitzvah b'shata, a mitzvah on its appropriate time is considered especially important, especially precious. So many other poskim say that a Mila Bismana should take precedent. Major Achronim on both sides. Rav Yaakov Ariel relates that this question once arose in Kfar Maimon. There were 2 brisos, 2 different children, 2 different fathers, 2 different mo'alim, and the question arose, should we follow the Dvar Avram and make sure to do the Mila Shalom Bismana first or not? He goes through all the different opinions at length. He concludes that, certainly in this case, he says there is no obligation to make sure to do the Mila Shalom Bismana first, that we don't follow the Dvar Avram, certainly not in this case. Gives a number of reasons. First, he says, in our case, there are 2 different fathers, 2 different mo'alim. He says the entire debate about precedence is when the milos are connected, it's one father or one mo'al, you have to know which one to do first. Then we have this argument that we should do the Mila Shalom Bismana first, according to the Dvar Avram. Here he says they're unrelated, they're unconnected, and therefore each father can schedule his bris whenever he wants, and there's no concern for doing the Shalom Bismana first. Brings other arguments. His final argument is there are many Gedolei Achronim who disagree with the Dvar Avram, including Rav Chaim Soloveitchik. Rav Chaim originally held like the Dvar Avram, changed his mind. Since there are a number of Gedolei Achronim who disagree with the Dvar Avram, he says his Rebbe, Rav Shaul Yisraeli, told him that the consensus of poskim is that we don't follow the Dvar Avram. Therefore, he says that in our case, in this case, there's no obligation to follow the injunction of the Dvar Avram and dafka make the Mila Shalom Bismana first. You can do it the other way. You can have the Mila Bismana first.